Okay, well, we've had confirmation. Congratulations, Martin Brundle. You were spot on in your predictions. Let's deal with Carlos Sainz, first of all, getting the big seat at Ferrari, most drivers' dream seat. But is it such a dream seat? In the announcement news release, team boss Mattia Binotto is saying it's a long road for Ferrari to get where they want to be.
Well, I think it's a no-brainer for Carlos Sainz to want to go to Ferrari at this stage of his career. He's got quite a lot of experience despite his tender years. I think it's a really good match with Charles Leclerc. For me, Sainz is the teammate who pushed Max Verstappen hardest so far in Formula One. And even if it takes 2 or 3 years, he can afford that. Sebastian Vettel couldn't afford that time. He'd lost his mojo a bit with the team, a little bit of belief, and vice versa, I think, and that's why they parted company. So it's a very dynamic young duo. It is something to build on for the future. Ferrari showed race-winning pace last year, sort of championship challenging pace. Turns out they were being just a touch too clever on the fuel management. So maybe that was a bit of a false dawn. If I was in Carlos Sainz's position, I wouldn't have hesitated to take this opportunity. You have to go for it with a team like Ferrari knocking on your door.
I had sources high up in the football agents world telling me that Lewis Hamilton was Ferrari bound. You stuck to your contacts who was spot on, Martin, but maybe it is a question. Why weren't there more serious conversations between Hamilton and Ferrari about him moving there?
You've got to stick to the Formula One people for Formula One information, haven't you? I think Lewis made it clear in interviews we've done, conversations you have with him, that his future, I mean, every race he's won in Formula One, whether it be at McLaren or Mercedes, had a Mercedes engine, and the long-term relationship he can have with that company, it's still going to be the team to beat. He's still going to be the man to beat through this shortened season. And I don't think necessarily Ferrari wanted to pair up a Leclerc-Hamilton scenario. They do need to keep rebuilding the team, and we just know what it's like. Somebody at Ferrari must have been thinking, I do not want to see my two cars running into each other again, as we saw in Brazil last year, or the shenanigans. And I'm sure they can control Sainz better like that. It would be electric to see Hamilton in a Ferrari, but it just doesn't. I don't think it would make sense for Lewis. And of course, Lewis is 35 years old now. We're talking about young guns in their early 20s that Ferrari are focusing on. So what did Lewis say to us? I love the color red. Red is passion. I've got red in my crash helmet. I would love to be dressed in red to an extent, but Mercedes is where my home is. So it didn't ever seem to have a lot of traction. Although, of course, with Verstappen sitting down at Red Bull long term, although I'm sure he can exit there at a certain point if he wants to. Leclerc looks like he's got the high ground at Ferrari. Lewis out of contract. It's not the most comfortable place for Lewis to find himself, but he is Lewis Hamilton after all.
Yeah. So will it never happen for Hamilton at Ferrari? Almost certainly.
Not now, I don't think. No, I mean, never say never. This is a strange old business. Here we are talking all about 2021. And when we haven't even got underway in 2020, and can you imagine how many team orders Vettel's going to pay attention to this coming year? He wasn't interested last year. Now he's leaving the team, or Sainz wheel to wheel with a Ferrari, then they make contact, or Ricciardo wheel to wheel with a McLaren and then crashing or something. There's going to be some strange stories going on before they do finally make these moves we're talking about today.
Written in the stars for Vettel to win the title with Ferrari, isn't it? Almost in the perverse world of sport.
Well, I was thinking that just this morning, Craig, when I saw all the confirmations coming out. Expect to see a very feisty, fast Sebastian Vettel. Wouldn't underestimate him at all. And he'll be racing for Seb. I don't think he'll be paying too much attention to what's going on around him, and he certainly won't care too much for Charles Leclerc's ambitions.
Okay, well, this is it's all very interesting. We have to ask about Sebastian Vettel now that we know definitely he's not going to McLaren. We think Renault are going to take their time, maybe looking towards one of their younger drivers for 2021. could there be any openings for Vettel, Mercedes possibly alongside Hamilton, or are you feeling even more confident it's retirement now, maybe for him?
I do know that Sebastian was talking to at least one team, so clearly retirement is not absolutely on his mind. He's got to have a chance at Renault. I would have thought if he wants, that's a works team. You'd worry moving into the future, you know, with Concord agreements coming up and the way the motor industry is at the moment. Renault will be lone rangers. They'll be the only people using the Renault engine as of 2021 as McLaren move over to Mercedes, which I think is what's appealing to Ricciardo. So I think Alonso is desperate to get back into Formula One. He'll be throwing his hat in the ring somewhere. Could it be a third trip to Renault for him? It seems, yeah, if I had to put money on it right now, I'd say that it might be Sebastian's swan song, his farewell. But we don't know. And he's still got great speed. You know, he still won late in 2019 with some stunning drives. So he's got the pace. But it depends how much money Renault have got to spend and how secure, you know, and where Formula One finds itself in these rather difficult times that we all find ourselves in.
I suppose that's a factor for all the marquee drivers. And someone who was on very big money, Daniel Ricciardo, 26.5 million euros a year. We found that out by his civil court case he was involved in, has gone to McLaren. Sideways move, obviously wasn't very impressed with how Renault were doing to leave so quickly.
He hasn't enjoyed it there. You know, I barely remember seeing Daniel through last season. And I used to see him all the time, chit chat, and, you know, he'd always got that big flip top smile on, hadn't he? And for some reason, it just didn't work for him there. The car didn't seem to play on his speciality of, you know, last of the late breakers. And whatever it is, he fancies more the McLaren and the incoming Mercedes engine. Maybe he's concerned about where Renault might be in the future. I'd be surprised if Renault pull out of Formula One, but, you know, would anything really surprise us at the moment, the way the world is going? So it is really a bit of a sideways move, but Daniel's obviously seen something at Renault that doesn't fill him with confidence into the future.
And just finally, talking about McLaren, they might even think this is a net gain. However well Sainz performed, Ricciardo was their top target a year or so ago, wasn't he? So they've got a big name, perhaps at a relatively cut price fee. I don't know what they're paying him, but yeah, they could be well primed to take another little step forward.
Well, if Daniel's had a couple of years of Renault money, and plus what he wouldn't have been underpaid at Red Bull, so it's about performance for him. I think it's a fairly level swap, if I'm honest. Daniel brings probably more experience and obviously a lot more race wins and to McLaren. Possibly, McLaren are probably sitting there thinking we've had a net gain here, depending on what they've got to pay him. It'll certainly be the giggling team, won't it, between Ricciardo and Lando Norris. They do like a good laugh, those two. So now they'll be teammates. So all in all, yeah, Daniel's experience and Daniel's race-winning confidence, if you like, Carlos hasn't had yet because he's had one podium position and not race victories. So, on reflection, as I'm talking to you and thinking, McLaren might well view this as a gain, a net gain on the swap.
Okay, well, I'll have to say thanks to all the teams and drivers for giving us something to talk about in these difficult times. Thank you, Martin.
Absolutely. Thanks, Craig.